All right, strap in, everyone. We're going deep on platform revolution today, and you've picked out Chapter 8, Governance.
Which tells me you're interested in how these big online spaces are, managed and controlled.
Exactly. Like, what are the rules of the game? Because we're all playing these platforms, but do we really understand how they work?
And those rules, they can make or break a platform and determine how businesses operate, how we interact with each other, everything.
Speaking of broken platforms, the book starts off with that Keurig 2.0 story. Remember that? The whole coffee pod debacle.
Yeah, Keurig tried to, lock out the competition.
Right. By making their machines only work with their own pods.
Total power grab.
Yeah.
And it backfired spectacularly.
Consumers were furious. They felt trapped, like Keurig was dictating what coffee they could drink.
It was a classic violation of one of the key principles of good platform governance.
Which is?
Don't abuse your power. Platforms get their power from their users. When you forget that, you start making decisions that hurt everyone, including yourself.
Keurig definitely learned that the hard way. Their sales plummeted. They had to backtrack. The whole thing was a mess.
It also shows how important it is for platforms to create value for their users. If you're not making your users' lives better, they'll go elsewhere.
Makes sense. So don't abuse your power and create value for your users. What's the third principle?
Take a fair share of the wealth. Platforms need to make money, obviously, but it can't be at the expense of their users or partners. It's about finding a balance, a sustainable way to create value for everyone involved.
Balance is key. Kind of like how a well-run government needs to balance the needs of its citizens with the need to maintain order and stability.
That's a great analogy. The book actually compares these massive platforms like Facebook, Google, Alibaba to modern-day states. Their reach is global, they have huge economic influence, and they have to grapple with all sorts of complex issues, just like a government would.
It's mind-blowing when you think about it. We're talking about companies that have more users than many countries have citizens.
And they're making decisions that impact billions of people's lives. So yeah, good governance is critical. It can determine whether these platforms are a force for good or for ill.
So are there any real-world examples of a nation-building approach to platforms actually working?
The book highlights the incredible transformation of Singapore under Lee Kuan Yew. Now, I know this sounds a bit weird comparing a nation-state to a digital platform, but...
No, I'm curious. Tell me more.
In the 1950s, Singapore was a mess. Poor, corrupt, no resources. Lee Kuan Yew came in and said, we're going to fix this. And he did, by focusing on good governance. He established the rule of law, cracked down on corruption, and created a system that encouraged fair play.
And that led to...
Singapore becoming one of the wealthiest nations in the world. They had practically nothing, and they built themselves up through sheer force of good governance. It's proof that even without natural resources, good governance can unlock incredible prosperity.
Wow, that's a powerful example. So by establishing a solid foundation of trust and fairness, Singapore attracted investment, encouraged innovation, and basically boomed.
Exactly. And that's what successful platforms need to do. They need to create environments where users feel safe, transactions are transparent, and the rules are applied fairly. When that happens, everyone wins. Users win, businesses win, the platform itself wins.
It all comes back to that balance we were talking about. But even with the best intentions, things can go wrong. The book mentions these market failures that can happen, even on platforms that seem like free markets, like eBay.
Oh yeah, remember that story about the mislabeled Allsop's Arctic Ale?
Yeah. The seller accidentally listed this rare bottle for a fraction of its real value, and some savvy buyer snagged it for a steal.
And made a huge profit. It's a classic example of information asymmetry.
Information what?
Asymmetry. It means one party has more knowledge than the other, which gives them an unfair advantage. In this case, the buyer knew the true value of the ale, but the seller didn't.
So it wasn't just a case of the seller making a mistake, it was a structural problem with the market itself.
Exactly. And platforms need to be aware of these kinds of imbalances and try to correct them. Otherwise, they risk creating a system that's rigged against certain participants.
So it's not enough to just create a platform and let people do whatever they want. You need to actively manage it to ensure fairness.
Absolutely. And that's where the concept of governance comes in. Platforms need to establish rules, norms, and mechanisms to mitigate these market failures and create a level playing field.
Sounds complicated. So what are these market failures that platforms need to watch out for?
Well, we've talked about information asymmetry, but there's also the issue of externalities.
Externalities?
Yeah, it's like when actions on the platform have consequences for people who aren't even involved in the transaction.
Give me an example.
Think about the spread of misinformation online. That can harm people far beyond those who initially shared the false information.
Right, like a ripple effect of bad information. But aren't there positive externalities too?
Of course. Imagine a platform that connects people with mentors or resources they wouldn't have found otherwise. That's a positive spillover effect, benefiting people beyond the initial interaction.
So it's about maximizing the positive externalities and minimizing the negative one.
Exactly. Then there's the issue of monopoly power.
Like when one company gets too big and starts dictating terms to everyone else?
Exactly. Like Zynga on Facebook. They got so big that they could basically dictate terms to Facebook and potentially squeeze out smaller developers. Platforms need to be careful about letting any one player become too dominant.
So it's about maintaining a healthy ecosystem where competition can thrive. What's the last market failure we need to worry about?
Risk.
As in the inherent uncertainty of doing business online.
Exactly. Will the product arrive, as described? Will the payment go through? Platforms need to build in mechanisms to mitigate these risks and build trust among their users. Otherwise, people will be hesitant to participate.
It sounds like a lot for platforms to juggle. So how do they actually put all these principles of good governance into practice? Like, where do they even start?
Well, the book draws on the work of Lawrence Lessig, who identified 4 key levers of control that platforms can use: laws, norms, architecture, and markets.
Okay, let's break those down, starting with laws. I'm assuming this isn't just about obeying the, actual laws of the countries they operate in, right?
Right. It's about the platform's own internal rule book.
Mm.
There are terms of service, community guidelines, those sorts of things. Even things like point systems that encourage good behavior, like on Stack Overflow, for example.
That website for programmers, right?
Yeah. They have a system for earning points,
Yeah.
which then gives you more privileges on the site.
So it's about setting clear expectations and rewarding users who follow the rules. What about punishing bad behavior, though? How do they handle that?
That's where things get a little more strategic. The book suggests that the rules for, good behavior, those should be clear and transparent. But the rules around punishment, those should be a bit more, opaque.
Wait, really? Why is that? Shouldn't everyone know exactly what will get them penalized?
Think about it this way. If bad actors know exactly how the system works, they'll just find ways to exploit it. But if there's a little bit of mystery, it makes it harder for them to gain the system.
Ah, so a bit of strategic ambiguity keeps everyone on their toes. Makes sense. Okay, we've covered laws. What about norms?
Norms are the unwritten rules, the culture that kind of emerges organically on a platform. How people are expected to behave. Think about the difference between, Twitter and Instagram. People act very differently on those two platforms.
Really different vibes.
And that's partly because of the design of the platform and the kind of community that's developed around it.
The book actually tells a great story about iStockPhoto, that stock photo website.
Oh, yeah, with Bruce Livingston.
Right, the founder. He was super intentional about building a positive community from the very beginning.
He understood that a strong community was crucial for the success of the platform.
So what did he do?
Started by personally curating the content, making sure only high-quality photos were uploaded.
Yeah.
He empowered trusted users to become moderators, and he publicly recognized people who were contributing great work. It was all about fostering a culture where people felt valued and wanted to do their best.
So it wasn't just about setting rules, it was about creating a certain feeling, a shared sense of ownership.
Exactly. And this ties into the concept of behavior design, which is something that platforms can use to nudge users toward desirable actions. It's all about creating a cycle of triggers, actions, rewards, and investments.
Can you give an example?
Like Pinterest, for example. You see a beautiful picture of a beach, that's the trigger. You click on it and you land on Pinterest, that's the action. Then Pinterest shows you a bunch of other gorgeous travel photos. That's the reward.
And then you're hooked.
And then they suggest you create an account or follow some travel boards. That's the investment. It's all very subtly designed to guide you down a path that benefits both you and the platform.
Wow, it's like they're playing chess with our minds. Okay, so we've covered laws and norms. What about architecture?
Architecture, in this context, refers to the software code, the actual technology that underpins the platform. And believe it or not, well-designed software can actually encourage good behavior and even mitigate those market failures we were talking about.
Really? Give me an example.
Okay, think about those peer-to-peer lending platforms, like Zopa. They use algorithms to assess the risk of borrowers, considering things like credit scores, online reviews, all that data.
So it's like a high-tech credit check.
Yeah, But it's actually more efficient than traditional loan officers and can actually reduce defaults, which makes the system fairer and more robust for everyone.
So the code itself is promoting fairness and efficiency. That's pretty cool. Any other examples?
Well, remember those eBay buyers who were exploiting misspellings to snag bargains? Well, eBay introduced a spelling assistance feature, which basically corrected those market failures by helping sellers list their items accurately.
It's like the platform itself is learning from its mistakes and evolving to become fairer.
Exactly. And then there's the most, maybe mind-blowing example of all, Bitcoin and blockchain technology.
Okay, I'll admit, blockchain is one of those buzzwords I hear all the time, but I'm not sure I fully understand. Can you explain it in, like, a simple way?
Imagine a digital ledger, but it's not controlled by any one entity. It's distributed across a network of computers, so it's completely decentralized and transparent. Every transaction is recorded on this ledger, and anyone can verify its authenticity.
So it's like a public record of every transaction, but it's also super secure.
Exactly. And here's the key. Only the person with the private key can control their assets. It's like a digital vault that no one else can access.
So it cuts out the middleman and creates a system of trust that's based on math and cryptography. That's pretty amazing.
And this enables something called smart contracts, which are basically self-executing agreements where the terms are written into the code itself. No need for lawyers or intermediaries. The blockchain enforces the agreement automatically.
The book gave the example of a wedding photographer and a couple using a smart contract. The photographer gets paid automatically once the photos are delivered. No more chasing down payments.
Exactly. It eliminates risk and builds trust by automating the entire process. Blockchain is really a game changer because it allows for direct, secure transactions without relying on traditional institutions.
Okay, I'm starting to get it. Blockchain is like building a system of trust directly into the technology itself. It's like a new form of digital infrastructure for a more transparent and equitable world.
I like that way of putting it.
Oh.
Okay, so we've talked about laws, norms, and architecture. That brings us to the fourth lever of control, markets.
Okay, markets. So we're talking about money now?
It is about money, but it's broader than that. Markets refer to the incentives that drive behavior on platforms. And that includes things like fun, fame, and even what's called social currency.
Social currency? What's that?
Think about it like this. What makes people want to be on Twitter? Or Instagram? Or any platform, really?
Well, to connect with people, to share their thoughts, to be part of a community.
Exactly. And all of that has value. That's social currency. It's the likes, the shares, the comments, the followers. All of that contributes to your social standing within the platform.
So it's like building your own little empire within the platform. Your influence is your currency.
You got it. And platforms can leverage this social currency to encourage positive behavior. Think about iStock Photo. Every time someone downloaded a photo, the photographer earned credits that could be exchanged for cash.
So they're essentially creating an internal economy within the platform.
Right, and that creates a powerful incentive for photographers to upload high-quality work and for users to be active and engaged members of the community.
It's brilliant. It's like a self-sustaining ecosystem where everyone is motivated to contribute and the platform thrives as a result.
And even big companies like SAP, the software giant, have figured out how to use social currency to drive innovation. They have a system where employees earn points for answering questions and sharing knowledge. And these points can be converted into donations to charities.
That's amazing. It's like a corporate social responsibility program built directly into the platform.
Exactly. And here's the really interesting part. SAP has actually used this system to influence their developer economy, much like a central bank uses monetary policy to steer a national economy.
So by adjusting the flow of this social currency, they can encourage certain behaviors and basically make things happen that benefit the company.
Exactly. It's a powerful tool. So we've seen how platforms can govern their users through these four levers: laws, norms, architecture, and markets. But what about how platforms govern themselves?
You mean like internally?
Exactly. How does a platform ensure that it's acting responsibly and ethically? How does it make sure that its own internal systems are fair and transparent? That's what we call self-governance, and it's just as important as governing the community itself.
That makes sense. You can't really expect to create a well-functioning platform if you don't have your own house in order, right?
Precisely. And the first principle of smart self-governance is internal transparency.
Okay, break that down for me. What does that actually look like in practice?
It means that different departments and divisions within the platform need to be able to see and understand what other parts of the company are doing. It's about breaking down silos and having everyone on the same page.
So no one's working in the dark.
Exactly. Everyone needs to have access to the information they need to do their jobs effectively, and they need to be able to communicate with each other easily and efficiently.
I think I read something about this in the book, something about Amazon and what's called the Yegi rant.
Ah, yes. The Yeg rant. It's a classic example of how internal transparency can lead to unexpected breakthroughs. It all started with a guy named Steve Yeg, a former Google and Amazon executive.
What did he do?
Well, he was frustrated with what he perceived as Google's lack of innovation, and he decided to vent his frustrations in a very public way by writing a long, rambling blog post that quickly went viral.
And this blog post got Amazon's attention.
It did. And the funny thing is, Yeg wasn't even trying to praise Amazon. He was actually criticizing Google. But in the process, he inadvertently revealed some interesting insights into Amazon's internal culture.
What kind of insights?
He talked about how Amazon was obsessed with data, how they made decisions based on evidence rather than gut feeling. And he talked about their use of service interfaces, which are basically like a common language that allows different parts of the company to talk to each other.
So it's kind of like what we were talking about earlier with everyone being on the same page.
Exactly. And Jeff Bezos, Amazon's CEO, read this blog post and he was like, this guy's on to something.
So he took Yegi's criticisms to heart.
He did. He actually sent out a company-wide memo mandating that all Amazon teams must communicate with each other through these standardized service interfaces. No exceptions.
That's kind of amazing. He took advice from a disgruntled ex-employee who was ranting online.
He did, and it turned out to be a brilliant move. This mandate, which became known as the Yeg mandate, had a profound impact on Amazon's culture and operations.
How so?
It forced different teams to work together more closely, to share data more freely, and to think more creatively about how they could leverage each other's strengths. It was like he created this giant ecosystem within Amazon itself where information could flow freely and innovation could flourish.
It's like that saying, sunlight is the best disinfectant. By making everything transparent, you create an environment where problems can be identified and solved more easily.
Exactly. And one of the most remarkable outcomes of this push for internal transparency was the creation of Amazon Web Services, AWS.
The cloud computing platform.
The very same. It all started when Andrew Jassy, who is heading up Amazon's technology division, realized that if different parts of Amazon were struggling to share data, then other companies were probably facing the same challenge.
So they said, hey, we've solved this problem for ourselves. Why not sell the solution to the world?
Precisely. They took the infrastructure they had built to power Amazon's internal operations and turned it into a cloud computing platform that anyone could use. And the rest, as they say, is history.
Wow, that's an incredible story. It shows how a commitment to internal transparency can lead to unexpected innovations and even whole new business models.
And it all started because Jeff Bezos was willing to listen to a disgruntled ex-employee who was ranting online. Sometimes the best ideas come from the most unexpected places.
So internal transparency is key. What about that second principle of platform self-governance, the one we were talking about before? Participation.
Ah, yes, participation. This is all about platforms giving their external partners a voice in key decisions. It's about recognizing that a platform's success depends on the health of the entire ecosystem.
So it's not just about what's good for the platform itself, but what's good for all the players involved.
Exactly. Platforms need to be willing to collaborate with their partners, to listen to their feedback, and to make decisions that benefit the entire community. Otherwise, they risk alienating their partners and creating a system that's unsustainable in the long run.
The book actually has a really compelling example of this with Intel and the development of the USB standard.
Ah, yes, the USB story. It's a classic example of how a platform can benefit from embracing participation.
So back in the mid-90s, Intel was developing the USB standard
And they could have easily kept it proprietary. They could have said, this is our technology, we're going to control it, and we're going to reap all the rewards.
which is what a lot of companies would have done.
Exactly. But Intel took a different approach. They realized that to make USB truly successful, they needed to make it an open standard, something that anyone could use and build upon.
So they decided to share the power.
They did. They created this neutral governing body called the USB Implementers Forum, and they invited representatives from all sorts of companies to participate. They even invited their competitors.
Wow, that's pretty radical.
It was, but it turned out to be a brilliant move. By giving all these different stakeholders a voice in the development of the standard, Intel ensured that USB would meet the needs of a wide range of devices and applications.
So it wasn't just about what Intel wanted, it was about what the entire industry needed.
Exactly, and that led to widespread adoption, which ultimately made USB the universal standard it is today. If Intel had tried to go it alone, USB might have languished in obscurity.
It's a powerful example of how a platform can benefit from embracing participation and sharing power.
Absolutely. When you bring people together and give them a voice, you create a sense of ownership and shared purpose. And that can lead to incredible things.
So internal transparency and external participation, two essential ingredients for effective platform self-governance.
Two sides of the same coin. And when platforms get both of these right, they create this virtuous cycle of trust, innovation, and growth. They become magnets for talent, investment, and ideas. They become places where amazing things can happen.
It's clear that fairness isn't just some abstract concept, right? It's actually essential for building a thriving platform.
It really is. When users trust that a platform is fair, they're more likely to invest their time, energy, and resources. They're more willing to innovate, to collaborate, because they know they're not going to get, screwed over.
It's like that saying, a rising tide lifts all boats. When the platform is fair, everyone benefits.
Exactly. Good governance creates an environment where everyone has the opportunity to succeed, which leads to more innovation, more economic activity, more prosperity for everyone involved. It's a win-win situation.
Makes you wonder why more platforms don't prioritize fairness. I mean, it just seems like good business sense. But the book also acknowledges that, well, no system is perfect, right? There will always be new challenges, new loopholes to exploit.
That's true. And that's why successful platforms need to be adaptable. They need to be constantly evolving. Their governance systems can't be static. They need to keep pace with new technologies, changing user behaviors, and those who are always trying to game the system.
So it's like a constant dance between the platform and its users, each one trying to outmaneuver the other.
In a way, yes, but I think it's more helpful to think of it as a collaboration. Successful platforms understand that their users are their greatest asset. They listen to their feedback, they adapt to their needs, and they constantly strive to create a better experience for everyone.
It's like Blockbuster refusing to evolve, while Netflix was busy transforming how we watch movies.
Perfect example. Blockbuster clung to their outdated business model, while Netflix embraced innovation and adapted to changing consumer preferences. The result: Blockbuster is a relic of the past, and Netflix is a global powerhouse.
It's a powerful reminder that platforms can't afford to be complacent. They need to be constantly evolving, refining their governance mechanisms just to stay relevant, especially as technology keeps advancing at such a crazy pace. Speaking of which, what about artificial intelligence? How will that impact platform governance?
That's a huge question, and one that we're all still grappling with. I mean, algorithms are already playing a significant role in shaping our online experiences, right? From curating our news feeds to recommending products to even making decisions about who gets access to certain services.
It's a little unsettling to think about, honestly, like algorithms having that much power over our lives.
I understand that concern. And it highlights the need for transparency and accountability in how these algorithms are designed and deployed. We need to make sure they're not perpetuating biases, discriminating against certain groups, or undermining the principles of fair and equitable governance.
So it's not just about the code itself, it's about the values of the people who create and control that code.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
We can't just abdicate responsibility and say, oh, the algorithm did it. We need to be actively involved in shaping the rules of the game, making sure that AI is used in a way that benefits humanity.
It feels like we're entering a whole new era of platform governance, one that's both exciting and, potentially a little scary.
It is. And it's an era that demands our attention, our critical thinking, and our willingness to engage in these tough conversations about the role of technology in our lives.
So as we move deeper into this world of platforms and algorithms, what are some key takeaways for our listeners? What can they do to be more informed and empowered users?
The most important thing is to be aware. Be aware of the power dynamics at play, be aware of the rules that govern these platforms, and be aware of your own rights and responsibilities as a user.
Don't just be a passive consumer, be an active participant.
Exactly. Ask questions, challenge the status quo, demand better. And remember, you have a choice. You can choose which platforms you support, how you engage with them, and you can use your voice to advocate for a better digital world.
So it's about taking ownership of our online experiences and not letting the platforms dictate the terms.
Exactly. We have more power than we realize. And by using that power wisely, we can shape the future of these platforms in a way that benefits all of us.
This has been a really thought-provoking conversation. I feel like I've gained a much deeper understanding of how these platforms work and, the challenges they face.
I'm glad to hear that. And remember, this is just scratching the surface. There's so much more to explore in the world of platform governance.
Speaking of exploring, let's shift gears a bit and delve into a specific example of platform governance in action. The book talks about this concept of self-governance, how platforms govern themselves internally. And they highlight this fascinating story about Amazon and what's called the Jaeger rant.
Ah, yes, the Jaeger rant, a classic tale of internal transparency and its unintended consequences.
Yeah.
It all started with this, disgruntled former Google and Amazon executive named Steve Jobs.
What did he do?
He basically wrote this long, rambling blog post where he was venting his frustrations about Google and, praising Amazon's culture.
And this blog post went viral.
Oh, yeah, it blew up online. And somehow it ended up on Jeff Bezos' desk. And, Bezos being Bezos, he was intrigued.
Intrigued by what?
By Yegg's description of Amazon's internal culture. Specifically, Yeg praised Amazon's obsession with data and their use of these things called service interfaces.
Service interfaces. Remind me what those are again.
They're basically like a universal language that allows different parts of the company to communicate and share data seamlessly. It's like creating a common ground where everyone can understand each other, regardless of their technical expertise.
So it's about breaking down silos and making sure that information can flow freely across the organization?
Exactly. And this was a key part of Amazon's success. Bezos believed that by creating a culture of internal transparency, he could foster innovation and empower his employees to make better decisions.
And this belief led him to issue a company-wide mandate based on this Jaeger rant.
He did. Bezos sent out this now famous memo where he declared that all Amazon teams must communicate with each other through these standardized service interfaces. No exceptions. It was pretty radical.
That's pretty amazing. He took advice from a disgruntled ex-employee who was ranting online.
He did.
Yeah.
And it turned out to be a stroke of genius. This mandate, which became known as the Jaeger mandate, had a profound impact on Amazon's culture and operations.
How?
It forced different teams to work together more closely, to share data more freely, and to think more creatively about how they could leverage each other's strengths. It was like he created this giant ecosystem within Amazon itself where information could flow freely and innovation could flourish.
It's like they say, sunlight is the best disinfectant.
Right. And one of the most remarkable outcomes of this push for internal transparency was the creation of Amazon Web Services, AWS.
The cloud computing platform?
The very same. It all started when Andrew Jassy, who was heading up Amazon's technology division, realized that if different parts of Amazon were struggling to share data, then other companies were probably facing the same challenge.
So they said, hey, we've solved this problem for ourselves. Why not sell the solution to the world?
Exactly. And that's precisely what they did. They took the infrastructure they had built to power Amazon's internal operations and turned it into a cloud computing platform that anyone could use. It was a brilliant move, and it all stems from this commitment to internal transparency.
That's a pretty incredible story. It just goes to show that sometimes the best ideas come from the most unexpected places. So we've talked about internal transparency. What about that second principle of platform self-governance, the one about participation?
Right. Participation is all about platforms giving their external partners a voice in key decisions. It's about recognizing that a platform's success depends on the health of the entire ecosystem.
So it's not just about what's good for the platform itself, but what's good for all the players involved.
Exactly. Platforms need to be willing to collaborate with their partners, listen to their feedback, and make decisions that benefit the whole community. Otherwise, you risk alienating your partners and creating a system that's just not sustainable.
And the book uses Intel and the development of the USB standard as a good example of this, right?
The USB story is a classic. So back in the mid-90s, Intel was developing the USB standard, and they could have easily kept it proprietary.
Meaning that only they could use it.
Exactly. They could have said, this is our technology, we're going to control it, and we're going to reap all the rewards.
Then a lot of companies would have done that.
Oh, absolutely. But Intel took a different approach. They recognized that to make USB truly successful, they needed to make it an open standard, something that anyone could use and build upon.
So they decided to share the power.
Exactly. They created this neutral governing body called the USB Implementers Forum. And get this, they invited representatives from all sorts of companies to participate. They even invited their competitors.
Wow, that's pretty wild. Inviting your competition to help develop your technology.
It was a bold move, but it turned out to be brilliant. By giving all these different stakeholders a voice in the development of the standard, Intel ensured that USB would meet the needs of a wide range of devices and applications.
So it wasn't just about what Intel wanted, but about what the entire industry needed.
Exactly. And that led to widespread adoption, which ultimately made USB the universal standard it is today. I mean, can you imagine a world without USB?
It's hard to imagine.
And it all happened because Intel was willing to embrace participation and share the power. If they had tried to go it alone, USB might have just, fizzled out.
So it's a powerful lesson in the benefits of collaboration.
Absolutely. When you bring people together, give them a voice, you create this sense of ownership, of shared purpose, and that's when really amazing things can happen.
So internal transparency and external participation, two crucial ingredients for effective platform self-governance.
Two sides of the same coin. And when platforms get both of these right, they create this amazing virtuous cycle.
Yeah.
Trust, innovation, growth. They become magnets for talent, for investment, for ideas. They become places where, amazing things can happen.
This whole conversation has really highlighted how much more there is to platforms than meets the eye. It's not just about having a cool app or website, right?
Right. It's about building a whole ecosystem, a community, and that takes careful management, careful nurturing.
It really is like tending a garden, like you were saying earlier.
Exactly. You need the right conditions, the right balance of elements, and you need to constantly be tending to it, making sure it's healthy and thriving. And in the world of platforms, that's where governance comes in. Good governance is the key to creating a flourishing digital ecosystem.
And what I find so interesting is that good governance isn't just about being nice or ethical, It actually makes good business sense.
It does. When platforms are governed well, everyone benefits. Users are happier, businesses thrive, and the platform itself becomes more successful.
So fairness is not just some moral imperative, it's actually a strategic advantage.
Exactly. And the most successful platforms understand this. They get that it's not just about maximizing profits in the short term, but about creating a sustainable ecosystem that can thrive in the long run. It's about playing the long game.
Like the difference between, extracting resources and cultivating them.
I like that analogy. Platforms that prioritize good governance are essentially cultivating their ecosystems. They're creating the conditions for growth, for innovation, for shared prosperity.
And they're doing it through a combination of, smart rules, thoughtful design, and a deep understanding of human behavior.
That's right. It's about using all the tools at their disposal. Laws, norms, architecture, and markets. And it's about understanding how people interact, what motivates them, what makes them tick.
So as we wrap up this deep dive into the world of platform governance, what are some key takeaways for our listeners? What can they do to be, more informed and empowered users?
Well, I think the most important thing is to be aware. Be aware of the power these platforms have, be aware of the rules they operate under, and be aware of your own rights and responsibilities as a user.
Don't just be a passive consumer.
Exactly. Be an active participant. Ask questions. Challenge the status quo. Demand better. And remember, you have a choice. You can choose which platforms you support, how you engage with them, and you can use your voice to advocate for a better digital world.
So it's about taking ownership of our online experiences and not just letting the platforms, dictate the terms.
Absolutely. We have more power than we realize. And by using that power wisely, we can shape the future of these platforms in a way that benefits all of us.
Well, this has been a fantastic conversation, really eye-opening. I feel like I've learned so much about how these platforms work, the challenges they face, and, the possibilities they hold.
I'm glad to hear that. And remember, this is just the beginning. As technology continues to evolve, the conversation around platform governance will only become more important.
So to our listeners, stay curious, stay engaged, and keep asking those tough questions. Until next time, happy exploring.